Hello and welcome to episode 19 of AARGH My Optics! A podcast where two grown adults discuss, overanalyze and generally take a kid's toy and media franchise a little too seriously. Usually that of the Transformers. I am your cantankerous, world-weary, cynical host, Orion Ghia, and with me is my unfocused, frequently distracted and easily led co-host, Virtual Dave. Hello, Virtual Dave.
Hello, listeners.
And oh boy, do we have a very special episode for you today, dear listener. Our very first interview with someone you've actually heard of. Due to some rather unbelievable friend of a friend nonsense, superstar Transformers writer James Roberts has very kindly offered us an hour of his time to chat with us. Amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So keen frequent listeners may have noticed I try to link our self-deprecating intros to the subject under discussion. So Dave, which two More Than Meets the Eye / Lost Light characters was I describing just then?
Oh. Tailgate and Swerve?
Almost. Tailgate was definitely the one I used for you. Unfocused, frequently distracted, easily led.
That's definitely me, yeah.
And the description I used, cantankerous, world-weary, cynical.
Oh,
Who
Ratchet.
could that be?
Ratchet.
Yay! So you have read some. Right, so mostly that's to demonstrate the point that I'm a big fan of James Roberts' work. Big fan of More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light. But Dave, previous to us securing this interview, you hadn't read that much, had you?
No, my knowledge of all of the IDW run has been patchy at best. It sprinkles down from what figures are in the toy line and whatever crossover comic I may have picked up along the way and odd trade here and there. It's very sporadic.
Yeah. I mean, I talk to you about comics quite a lot. Well, not a lot, but I talk to you about comics from time to time, and you tend to know a little bit about the characters or a little bit about the teams or whatever, but you don't tend to know much about the writers or the artists. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's very fair. I never really retain such information. Even if I did, I probably would get it wrong and be quoting an artist who had nothing to do with the franchise. I just try to avoid it.
Right, okay. Well, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about our experience of James Roberts' work, and then hopefully James will dial in and we'll have a good chat with him about anything and everything, really, but mostly his work with Transformers.
My optics!
It's fair to say you've been on a bit of a crash course to prepare for all this. So why don't you fill us in on your experience of his work thus far?
Okay. Well, from what I understand, James is, if not completely, but partially responsible for what goes on in Lost Light in particular, right?
Yes. He is the only writer on More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light, which are two comic books they're essentially the same comic book.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that they changed the name around about issue 57 of More Than Meets the Eye. They changed the name of the two main books, and More Than Meets the Eye became Lost Light. And the Lost Light is the name of the ship that they are flying around in.
Well, for the short few issues I've read now, I can say that I really like the characters in the story. I think it's one of the few Transformers stories where the war is ended, telling a story about how these characters deal with that and how they deal with each other after the fact. And I really like how the Lost Light team kind of are this mishmash of different eras of Transformers or weird abilities and odd shapes and sizes and characters you probably wouldn't expect to see together, but they're all, it's their flaws that kind of bring them all together, and they're not the
They're not the A-listers.
No, it's really much like this the people, some people that you've never heard. I mean, I swear Fizzle gets mentioned at one point. Wasn't that one of the sparkler mini-bots or...
What we were talking about before, yeah, in the previous podcast, the one about City of Fear, Marvel Comics. Yeah, they do. And like, I think Guzzle is a member of the Wreckers, and James Roberts' introduction to writing for IDW was co-writing Last Stand of the Wreckers, and Guzzle was in that. Yeah, the character work is fantastic. I love the way that he's brought all these disparate characters together and form a crew, and how quickly all those characters are formed and fleshed out is really impressive. He builds characters very quickly, and he gives them a personality and a voice that is really easy to differentiate from other characters. So, how far have you got?
I've got his... I don't remember what the guy's name is. Is it Farmer?
Oh, yeah.
There's a revelation that he was working with the DJD or caused this virus or something, and Ratchet ends up with his hands because he was having trouble with his hands.
Yes, because he's meant to be this amazing surgeon, but he's getting old and his hands are seizing up. There's a really great bit really early on where I think Wrong's talking to him about about how great a surgeon he is, and Ratchet's like, "Oh, it's really nice of you to say that he hits his hand with a hammer."
That's what I was going to say. Brilliant. I love that.
So yeah. I mean, you're kind of heading towards the end of the first mini arc, but like that's what's wonderful about the way James Roberts writes, is that he sets up stuff that pays off 20, 30, 40, 50 issues later. There's stuff in the first couple of issues that pay off in the last couple of issues of Lost Light that you wouldn't even notice at first. Like issue 1, there's stuff that pays off in the last issue, which I think is pretty impressive considering there's like 80 or so issues in total. It's a pretty long run for one writer and a really consistent art team pretty much. I mean, there's a few times where they have a guest artist, but you've basically got More Than Meets the Eye, it's pretty much all Alex Milne. And then when it switches to Lost Light, they have a change of artists, and it's Jack Lawrence. But there's very little deviation from that, and I always really appreciate that in a comic. Like, there's a lot of comics which really mess that up, because there's a synergy between artist and writer, and if you keep changing the artist, then it's gonna get spotty and weird, and it's gonna be a disconnect.
Yeah, this it's probably one of the reasons why it was hard for me to read the G1 comic we looked at in the last episode. The change in artist was dramatic, from how it began to how it finished, type of thing. Like that first panels we saw, and towards the end, it was a whole different feeling to the book.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and that happened a lot back then, especially in kids' comics. Yeah, what we're reading there, it was like 2 or 3 issues with one artist, and then another 2 or 3 issues with another artist. And because it's a continuous story, yeah, the artists will change in between. It is distracting. And I mean, it still happens. It still happens in Marvel Comics. It still happens in DC Comics. They'll either change the art and writing team midway through something, or they'll change the artist, or they'll just go, oh, well, this artist works very slowly, so we need to have someone fill in for these couple of issues because we need one to come out every month on the fucking month. And that can be really distracting. Some of my favourite comics are ones where the art and writing team stay consistent.
Who did you say the artist was for Lost Light?
Alex Milne. Jack Lawrence for Lost Light.
I think that's one of the few artists I've met at a convention, and actually had a talk with them about, being an artist. So it was a few years ago now, but I actually got to meet him and talk to him about being an artist, and that was very interesting. Very cool.
What was that at TF Nation?
Was that MCM?
MCM, okay, yeah. And did he tell you anything of note that you'd like to share?
Because I think at that point I was still very much into my artwork, so I think he was just telling me about how to get your artwork out there and just keep practicing and stuff, general good artist tips.
Yeah. It's good to meet those people in the flesh, so to speak.
My optics!
I suppose maybe I should just quickly kind of go over what the concept of the Lost Light and the More Than Meets the Eye is, which is that after the war, essentially you have 2 factions splitting off of Autobots. You have Bumblebee on Cybertron, trying to get things up and running and a new order on Cybertron after the war, and he has to deal with the fact that there's loads of non-aligned Cybertronians coming back to Cybertron now the war is over, and they're not very happy with the Autobots or the Decepticons for having this massive war. And then they're referred to as Nails, non-aligned indigenous life form. I think that's what it stands for. So he's dealing with that. But Rodimus is like, I want to go on a quest and find the Knights of Cybertron, because he got a map from part of the Matrix. He's going to go off and do that, and he thinks that's going to be a way of like taking things forward for the Cybertronian race. And also a jolly good adventure. The Transformers comic book, the G1 Transformers comic book, was split into two parts. More Than Meets the Eye and Robots in Disguise. And Robots in Disguise is the Bumblebee book, written by John Barber. And More Than Meets the Eye is the Rodimus book, written by James Roberts, who we'll be talking to very soon.
I've even been looking into what's been going on in Cybertron with Bumblebee and Prowl and the others left on Cybertron. And I feel like that side of it, I feel like I need to know more context, because some people are very angry and some people are very, still holding grudges against the war. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found the interaction very interesting because, like, you understand it. Like, the war has been going on for so long. There's obviously going to be tension,
baggage.
Like, it's just, you can't expect people to just be okay with each other after so long. And I think the element of the people who are not affiliated with any side as well is really interesting, because obviously they've gone to different planets and they've set up their own systems and ways of living, and very interesting.
Yeah, and I recommend, after all this, it seems you've now got an interest in it, pick up Volume 1 of Phase 2. The great thing about the collected hardbacks is that it has both More Than Meets the Eye and Robots in Disguise in chronological order. So you'll read like 2 or 3 issues of Robots in Disguise, and then you'll read some of More Than Meets the Eye. So you're kind of seeing what's happening simultaneously, which might consider that a little jarring. And I do have to say that I don't always want to do that way, but I like the way that that's set out. Obviously, if you just want to read More Than Meets the Eye, there's trades of More Than Meets the Eye. And if you just want to read Robots in Disguise, there's trades of that too. So you don't have to read it that way. But if you want to get the whole picture, I would suggest going that way, because you get to see what's happening in both books.
It's interesting the aesthetics of the characters, because like I said, that's how I know bits and pieces about IDW is via the toys. The characters get different looks along the way, and it very much ties in with the toy line. Like, a lot of people on Cybertron seem to have their War for Cybertron designs.
War for Cybertron?
Yeah.
Not the current one.
No, not the current
one. Well, this is what's annoying about Transformers. I wish they'd stop reusing the same strap lines.
Oh yeah, Robots in Disguise, More Than Meets the Eye.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to go, no, not that one. The other one. So you mean War for Cybertron, like the computer games?
Computer games, yeah.
Right, okay. That's true. And a lot of the designs are... Hasbro had a hand in that. They're like, we need you to use this design, we need you to do that, use that design. And then you have tie-in comics to the lines that were on the shelves at the time. Like, there was a Combiner Wars mini-series. And, I mean, the great thing about More Than Meets the Eye is it is barely touched by that stuff. Whereas Robots in Disguise, poor James Barber had to deal with that on a regular basis. Sorry, is it James Barber? John Barber, sorry. I mean, there's almost no interference from Hasbro in what goes on in More Than Meets the Eye and The Lost Light. It tends to keep out of that, all of that, which is great. You can read that and not have to know about that.
Yeah, that's one of the main things I really liked about it. It was, I didn't need to know who these characters were before this book started to really get into it or like the characters.
Well, many of them weren't really doing much before this book. Some of them, I mean, for instance, Tailgate is introduced in the book. And yeah, there's plenty of characters in this that have not really appeared in IDW previous to this. Or at least not appeared in a big way and not been nearly as fleshed out as they are in this, which I think is one of the strengths of the book. Like, these characters, they're like fully fleshed out people. There's plenty of stuff about them being Transformers, like about them having alt modes and the functionism and sparks and brain modules and transformation cogs. Lots of kind of crazy, almost Doctor Who-like science going on. But at the core of it all, they could be anything. They don't have to be Transformers. They're people. And I love the way that, like, new or underused characters are fleshed out, but then established ones like Rodimus and Ultra Magnus are given completely new sides to them that you've not seen before.
Yeah, I really liked Rodimus in the first few issues I've read. It's, not like I didn't like Rodimus, but it's like, I really like this upbeat interpretation of him and how charismatic he is. And this kind of, you know, I think Rodimus is always kind of, mostly depicted as struggling with leadership, but I think this version of him at least is a good captain of a ship.
I mean, he's still struggling with leadership, but he tries to style it out, basically.
Yeah.
He's quite insecure, really, but he has this kind of brash attitude. It's all attitude, basically. He coasts along on his kind of own kind of, not really belief in himself, but like this whole kind of idea that everything's going to be fine and nothing can go wrong because he's great and everything's great. Yeah, there's characters that you think you know and become quite different characters throughout the whole run. And there's loads of world building and lore creating that you see kind of happening throughout the whole thing. Lots of new kind of threats and baddies. I mean, the DJD, the Decepticon Justice Division, they're a new thing.
They're introduced in this?
I'm almost 100% sure they were introduced in this, yeah. And they're basically very, very dedicated to the teachings of Megatron. And they have a list of Decepticons who have transgressed against the teachings of Megatron, and they need to be hunted down and killed. And eventually Megatron ends up on that list. Because he basically... I mean, spoilers, guys. Megatron switches sides. Not that there really are sides, because the war is over, which is an important part of the book, but he does end up on the Lost Light as co-captain with Rodimus.
My optics!
Actually, something I wanted to talk about, actually, before we completely get onto toys and stuff. What I really thought was great about what James Roberts did is that he, and you'll have only seen a small amount of this, I imagine, but he basically identified that the Transformers is a homonormative society. Like, because most Transformers are male, it stands to reason that there'd be a lot of same-sex relationships. And that would be the norm, not the exception.
It makes complete sense. It really does.
Yeah. And I love that he explores that, as well as introducing transgender characters, which you probably won't have seen yet. And it's like brilliant that they do that kind of stuff. And I mean, I'm saying that as a cisgender white male. So, I mean, what do I know? But I've seen a lot of like LGBTQ plus folk reacting really well to it. And a lot of homophobes and transphobes reacting really badly to it. So that's good.
I remember when these issues, you know, were making, you know, Facebook posts and panels were posted in groups, and like I remember it happening, but I never really thought much of it. Like, I think Rewind and Chrome Dome were the one I saw the most, and like, you know, before any.
Well, I mean, they're essentially the first. They're essentially the first couple in the book, really.
Oh, okay. It's the more if you sat down and thought about how Transformers work as a race, or as a people, or as a society, it makes, you know, 100% sense.
Yeah, you'd think. A lot of people didn't think so, but those people are wrong. I get that some people are, I don't want my Transformers falling in love. I want them shooting each other in the face. It's like, well,
that's what happens.
Have we not had 30 years of that? Can we not have something a bit different? It's crazy that, you know, that people got so upset about that. I think it's brilliant.
My optics!
That really does lead us on to the influence of James Roberts and his work on the franchise. You were saying that the way you know this stuff is through the toys. Want to elaborate?
Yeah, well, I mean, what do they call it? Thrilling 30s? Had a lot of high-in toys to the comics. I mean, I think
They were packaged with comics, weren't they? Some of them?
yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think the deluxes were, but yeah, I think even now some of them are still held pretty in high regard. I think that Springer is some people's still favourite version of the character.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I knew that some of these characters were popping up. I mean, having a Generations toy of Rat Trap, and that meaning he's in some sort of on the side of Starscream, or like he's like his right-hand man at one point. And that...
Yeah, he's in Robots in Disguise. Early on anyway, because, spoilers, Starscream ends up becoming quite an important person on Cybertron.
I mean, so far he's my favourite character on that side. I mean, I've always been a fan of Starscream and his way of manipulating people for his own gain, but I'm always more interested in how he deals with that when he's not just Megatron he's manipulating or trying to overthrow, and it's other people as well. But stuff like that. So the toys got packed in the comics of a character. The character was in the comic, may not been not like a spotlight comic or anything, but they were in there.
Yeah, I remember all that happening, and that was when I wasn't really reading the comic. But I really did like the fact that these designs were being used in the comic in a good way, not in a kind of like irritating kind of like, well, there's no kind of like, let's make it look exactly like the toy. The artists were allowed to take liberties and not go, oh, well, we have to have half the alt mode hanging off the back.
Yeah.
I like that they didn't go War for Cybertron level. Let's just use the CAD models for the TV show. Why not? But because they've got massive backpacks and like little ports and things hanging off of them, and
well, that's a good example because, like I was saying, in More Than Meets the Eye, they do use the video game War for Cybertron designs, but it's not one for one. I can recognize that's the inspiration. It's not exactly the same.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. I mean, I think
And then there's new designs, new IDW specific designs, which I think is great. Like, you know, people like Chrome Dome and, I mean, Rodimus, the way Rodimus looks is not something that's taken from anywhere else. The tailgate design, obviously, is kind of based on the original G1 tailgate toy, but it's very different. Rung, there's quite a lot of characters in there that are completely brand new. Tarn, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So there's lots of really nice designs, and I think a lot of them were down to people like Nick Roche and Alex Milne. I think Jack Lawrence as well. There are some new characters introduced in the Jack Lawrence run that are, I think he's designed. But yeah, I mean, like you say, like, there's been lots of IDW designs, or designs that have been used in IDW, used in toys. More Than Meets the Eye is probably, I would say, is probably one of the most popular Transformers comic books there's been in ages. And this has spawned lots of fan art and third parties making toys of this stuff, and Hasbro making them as well. Like, with Hasbro, it's hard to say which came first. You know what I mean? Because Hasbro were involved, did have meetings with the writers and artists, and did say, we want you to put this design in, and etc, etc, etc. But that love from the fandom, that love of those comics, has resulted in people trying to put together a Lost Light crew, or put together a DJD, or put together characters that only appear together in the same place in this way in this comic. The idea that you want a Cyclonus with a skull-like head and horns to go with your tailgate, and you want a Chrome Dome and Rewind, and you want a cheeky-looking Swerve toy, and the third parties latched onto this. Yeah, people like Mastermind Creations and Make Toys doing essentially Chug-style More Than Meets the Eye characters that weren't being covered by Hasbro.
Even the early Iron Factory Legend stuff was very influential for WW, wasn't it? It was, didn't they do a DJD, or was that another company? Or was that...
Iron Factory did a Legends DJD combiner.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's what I mean. It's like there's loads of this stuff that's kind of come out that it wouldn't happen if it wasn't a great comic book.
Even to the the casual fan, like, I mean, I guess I kind of fall into that category. You know, these designs are, it's a quality to the artist, really. Like, they transcend the comic and stand alongside the timeless G1 iteration of these characters. You have Flames toys, heavily detailed, painted lights, proper high-end figure.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have these IDW characters taking mantle with that high-end level of collectors.
It's a good point, because a lot of what Flame Toys do is IDW influenced. A lot more of it than it is G1, to be honest. And those are very expensive figures, so they've got to have some faith in the fandom to want to buy that stuff. It speaks to the popularity of IDW in general, not necessarily just what the stuff James Roberts works on.
But I think that it's just I wanted to drive home the point that these characters, on their own, without the story, with the story, it's even better, and I can even get the desire more.
Mm.
I spoke to you yesterday about how now there is characters in this comic that I'm going to want physical representations of, because I like the character, but I really like the way they look. I like the way the characters are designed in IDW. It's one of the main things I've liked about the comic, even before, reading the bits and pieces I have. I think all of the designs in it are really cool.
Yeah.
The only problem is it's not a lot of times when those type of designs get put into a 3D world where they have to transform, sometimes it's a bit lackluster. But engineering and stuff since those early third party or Hasbro stuff is dramatically changed, and some of the stuff is really cool these days.
Yeah. And the great thing about More Than Meets the Eye is people barely transform anyway.
Well, yeah, there's that as well.
So, in a way, that removes some of that for you. But yeah, no, and there's been some fantastic stuff. I've become not obsessed, but I'm really into MMC, their reformatted line. I want the main Lost Light crew,
mm-hmm.
and I want the DJD, and then I've completely gone down the rabbit hole on that, and that is all due to the writing. Now, I didn't hate the designs in IDW, but I could take them or leave them, especially previous to More Than Meets the Eye, like Phase 1, because some of that stuff was quite heavily influenced by the movies that were happening at the time. There was some kind of slightly ugly, overly complicated looking designs that I didn't like. They simplified that a lot more. It became a lot more kind of in what I would consider sort of classic G1, but with its own style.
More spikes.
Well, yeah, and just a bit more comic book than cartoony. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a difference there, and Alex Milne's art is fantastic.
Mm.
I love it, and Jack Lawrence's as well. It's great. And I should mention Josh Burcham as well. His colouring is brilliant. It's just a very well put together book. But yeah, those designs, I don't think I would have wanted them if it hadn't been for James Roberts' writing. So I think with all that covered, I think James will be dialing in any moment now. So we'll reconvene when that happens, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
My optics!
Hello, James, and welcome to AARGH My Optics! We shout that all the time.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared for that.
Thanks for generously giving up your time to talk to us. I hope you didn't feel too pressured by our mutual friend Simon.
No, there was low key kind of intimidation, but that was more me towards him. Strangely.
Oh really? Well, it's
Yeah.
very hard to say no to that guy, I find.
Very persuasive man.
He is, yes. So we've only got a limited amount of time with you, so I don't want to waste too much of it, like introducing ourselves and gushing about how much we enjoy your work. But
Hey, I don't mind. No, okay, agreed.
But yeah, I am a big fan, and in researching this for this interview, I think we've made one of Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he hadn't really read much of the IDW stuff previous to.
Bittersweet thing to hear.
Yeah, I know.
Dave was skeptical. That's fair enough.
Well, yeah, he tends to experience things through what I describe as kind of tertiary media. So like he claims to be a Spider-Man fan, but he's barely read any Spider-Man comics. He's just watched movies and played computer games. That kind of thing.
I like the sound of this. No, I think you could be onto some new breed of I don't know, kind of like remote fandom or something. I don't know what it is. Like vicarious fandom.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, the theme of the podcast is that I'm the grumpy kind of pre-internet older fan, and Dave is the younger, more enthusiastic pop culture guy, I guess. What everyone calls it these days. But not to retread old ground too much, but would you want to say something about how you, James, got into Transformers?
Yeah, okay. Well, we had a little, not to shatter the illusion of this podcast too much, but we had a little chat before we started the cameras rolling. And then, you told me that you were there at the beginning in '84, and I wasn't there at the beginning. I was there. Well, see, it's funny, isn't it? Because I was there from '86, and for a long time that seemed like a huge gulf of time. But as age happens, that now seems like 2 weeks. 84 to '86 from this vantage point is like a blink. But in childhood terms, that's an ice age, isn't it? So, I don't know. I don't know what happened. I wasn't into comics or toys much, apart from Lego back in '84, and so it just didn't really cross my radar. I saw it on Whack-A-Day, the TV thing.
As did I.
Yeah, and I thought, and I hope I'm not going to shatter your illusion here, but for years and years, I thought, therefore, I was there. At least I'd seen that in '84. But I was looking at the broadcast dates for some other project, and I think it was 1985, summer holidays '85. They started showing it. So I think I was first aware of it then, and then friend of my brother's had issue 97 of the UK comic, which was Prey Part 2, and that was then that got me that piqued my interest, but it wasn't until I saw the movie in December '86. I got Blitzwing for my birthday the month before, and then I started getting the UK comic with issue 113, which is coincidentally a really good jumping on point. Actually, it was the beginning of the comic sequel to the movie.
Yeah.
So it had characters that I knew from the film, and it happened to be the first appearance of Death's Head that remains one of my favorite characters. So, and it was Jeff Senior doing the art, Furman, of course, writing it. The beginning of like an 9-part epic. And so, it was.
Yeah, so it's a great place to jump.
Yeah. I was going to make a sort of a cheap joke about like the worst issue to jump on, but back in those days, but actually there weren't too many dodgy issues there. But that was there. That was a cut above. That was a very strong issue to start with, and that was issue 113, and that's why there's various references to that number throughout my run.
Yeah, I've noticed. Yeah,
because it's a lot of effort to think of a random number, so just reach for one off the shelf.
Absolutely, yeah. I was just trying to think. I think the first issue of the comic that I got, I did look back, and I think it was like issue 4.
Now that's what is this? Were you just trying to show off there? Were you 7 months old or something? You can't see him, listeners, but he looks like a child. He's a child man. He just looks very youthful.
Yeah. Well, no, I think I was 6.
Yeah,
something like that.
I think we're the same age then. Okay. Oh well, that was a good.
Born in '78.
Okay, so a little younger than me, but
there you go.
Issue 4. Wow. So you were there for. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, but I have to admit that I wasn't like massively into it at first. It took time for me to.
Yeah.
And I think the comic took a while to get good, as it were.
It did. Yeah, I mean, the first year was under Sheila Cranner's editorship, and it was more of a magazine / robot anthology thing. And then Ian Rimmer came along as it became was it when it became weekly? It may have been a bit earlier than that, but he certainly it went weekly, it went full colour. It turned into what became the kind of Marvel UK house style. Sorry, for licensed comics at least. And then under Ian's editorship, I mean, he left around issue 104 and Furman took over. But it was a phenomenal comic, by sort of any measure, really. It was, I mean, I'm biased as a Transformers fan, but I think it's a really, really solid comic. And actually it only becomes greater in hindsight, really, as the UK market in particular moves away from that type of comic. Prior to that, you had. I'm going off on a tangent now, so I'll wrap it up. But you had like the you either had a Marvel superhero reprints, or you had the classic Beano Dandy, Whizzer and Chips type stuff, or you had Action in 2000 AD. But the kind of Transformers was arguably the first licensed toy comic, and kind of set the standard higher than anyone else was able to reach, actually. So anyway, R.I.P.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like when I was picking it up, what you'd find in the newsagents was that, and then things like 2000 AD and Dan Dare and stuff like that. Yeah, Eagle.
Yes, I mean, God, it was. I'm always telling not always telling my children this, because that'd be an awful thing. But I have told my children about the massive differences between growing up and going into a newsagent for a comic back in the 70s and 80s versus now. And it's all cover-mounted free gifts.
Yeah.
Yes.
and brand synergy and stuff, and
Yeah, I mean, Transformers had its share of cover-mounted free gifts.
Well, that's true. Yeah, from
like wildlife bars and all that kind of stuff.
There was nothing tawdrier than an edible free gift. That's like, come on. You want
absolutely.
I'm trying to think of the ranking of free gifts. I mean, like another booklet or comic was more pages was amazing. Or a booklet or a poster, like a big poster. But the other end is like a WHAM bar or something, that rocks on the cover. Yeah. God.
I think I heard that you've been trying to get hold of a full collection of the comic.
Yes.
In nice, pristine condition with all the free gifts. But I imagine you don't go as far as wildlife bars.
You'd be surprised. So I don't know if you've heard, I'm going to forget the name of this paradox now, but there's it's so-and-so's arrow, okay? And the idea is if you've got point A and point B, and you fire an arrow towards point B, right? And then the arrow stops halfway, okay?
Right.
And then you fire the arrow for the remaining distance, okay? And then you stop it at halfway, etc., right? You can do that for infinity, right? It's never going to reach its target. You can always halve the remaining distance. And so the question is, well, how does that arrow ever reach point B, right?
Okay, yes.
So with Transformers comics, I am on the quest to get a mint edition of every issue with free gifts and stuff. And then when I think I have got a mint edition of each issue, then I see one which appears to be in better condition. And so then that becomes the new standard the other issues must reach. And so I've been to various conventions as a guest, and in the downtime between signings and stuff, I just go and root through the back issue boxes on this, let's face it, this never to be fulfilled quest to have mint editions of each one. But I don't think, has there ever been an edible free gift with Transformers? I don't know if there has, actually.
Yes, wildlife bars.
Was that mounted on the cover, or did you send away for it?
I've got one here.
Oh no! This is like, Dave. I'm gonna have a breakdown on your podcast. But that's a token for it, isn't it? Or it's a token for a book.
Oh, you're right. Yes,
God,
you need a token for it, don't you? So So you might be right. Yeah. So maybe not.
The listeners, you can't see that he reached beyond the camera as if to produce an issue with a chocolate bar on the front, and I would have my world would have turned to dust. You see, because I was
So no, but I do remember there being comics with edible gifts though. So maybe those two things have kind of
you're quite right.
Coalesced in my mind.
If anyone out there collects the Incredible Hulk Presents, which lasted all of 9 issues, then I do have the one with a chew on the front or something, or some. I mean, what's that? 30 years old, 31 years old. It's probably it's probably like a landmass of its own.
Well, people do collect things like this and then open them and try them on YouTube and stuff, don't they? So
that's why this society is sick. That's why it's going down the pan. People like that.
Yeah. People who get ectoplasm from the old
oh man,
Ghostbusters,
the old Ghostbusters toys, and then open it.
I mean, what's that? What's it? ASMR? What is that? The right acronym? What's that stuff?
Yeah, maybe.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I guess I could just get someone to open my Incredible Hulk Presents sort of fondant bar and close mic it. Oh my God. Rake it in, that will.
Indeed. Well, so suffice to say, you're still still striving towards that goal. I've only started recollecting the old comics because I read a lot of them when I was a kid. Maybe not every single one.
Yeah.
But I saw a guy on Facebook who had like about 40 issues going for 15 quid. So I bought them, and now I'm on it.
That's it. Now.
To get them all.
You're in too deep now. There's no turning back.
Yeah, it's terrible, really.
I had I have got a complete collection, and I nearly had another complete collection, which I did sell off a few years ago. I won't tell you which ones that I need, because there's a couple where I want the poster still in, stapled in. You see what I mean? There's always another hill. You climb a hill and you find another one behind it. So, but there's something like that out there on eBay now, which I'm after. But will I ever know rest? It's unlikely. It's unlikely.
Yes, yeah. You best not mention it in case one of our 25 fans jumps in there and steals it from you.
But we haven't talked about the demographic of your fans, but I mean, the chances are it's not as if I'm telling this story on a podcast about olive oil or something, is it? I mean, they're going to be there's
no, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. We have to be careful what we're talking about and what we're searching for, whether it be toys or comics or whatever, just in case.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, otherwise it's like whatever the opposite of shorting stock is or something, and it's like insider trading. We could be, cause an eBay spike. We don't want that. Nobody wants that.
No, exactly. We'll just keep it quiet.
My optics!
So, I mean, to move on a little bit, so you got the gig. So how did you get the gig working, writing Transformers for IDW?
Yeah. So once I was into the comic, so I was into the comic and the toys and the TV stuff to a lesser extent. And I was still getting the occasional toy into the 90s and in a few of the G2 stuff. But that was kind of it had subsided for me. But I was always into the comics. And near the end of the US run, there was a letter in the comic. So there was a letter in the American comic talking about a fan club called Transmasters. Mm-hmm. And then in an issue of TFUK 311 or thereabouts, there was a UK letter saying, I'm a member of this club, and if anyone wants to know more, then write to me. So I did, and it happened fortuitously because so I got into this Transmasters UK just as the UK comic was ending, and there was a like-minded bunch of us, and we all were. We were all Transformers fans, but we were TFUK fans more than anything else. And we started doing our own fanfic. And I edited a fanzine, which was just showcasing the members' prose stories called Transtext. And this was 92, 93, 94. And the interesting thing about TM UK was that there was an unusual level of discipline in that we would all write stories that were, continuity friendly. So they all fitted into if they were set in the past, they were the Marvel UK continuity, and if they were going forward, we would, sort of work with each other and cooperate to make sure that we were all building out in the same way, which is
it's incredibly organised,
and in a way which I didn't really appreciate at the time. Maybe none of us did, but that was an unusual approach to be taken, with this sort of collective endeavour. And then I suppose I was of an age where other things were happening. I was an adult by this point, by the mid 90s, and I kind of fell away from the club a little bit. But when Beast Wars came along, there was an advert actually for Transmasters in the last of the Generation 2 comics by Fleetway. So this is a little bit pre-Beast Wars nonetheless, but 95, 96. There was an influx of members into Transmasters, and I got back in touch with an old member, and he's like, "Oh my God, have you heard about Beast Wars? And it's the number 2 toy in America after Star Wars or something. And there's a new CGI. What does CGI mean? Anyways, a new CGI cartoon and stuff." And So I got back into it, and I started writing sort of more long form prose stuff. Started writing very ambitiously. Started writing a sort of a unofficial novel, and but I made friends with some other guys, new members, including Nick Roach, who went on to do cover work and interiors for IDW. And so Nick was a good friend, although he and I never collaborated on stuff. I scripted some fan fiction. I did some more prose stuff, but Nick and I never worked together in the club. Anyway, he got a gig at IDW, and they gave him a mini series called, which was in the end called Last Under the Wreckers.
Yeah,
and he was to write it and write pencil ink 5 issues. And long story short, he the time was against him, and IDW said to him, "Look, we need to bring someone else in to sort of help you out. We've got a few people in mind." And Nick said, "Well, I've got somebody that I think would be good for it," which was, spoiler alert, which was me. Otherwise, that's a very rambling story in the wrong direction. No, it was me, everybody. So I sort of was given an opportunity to sort of to script part of issue 1 and to co-plot the series as a whole. I'm trying to think again as time goes on, the chronology gets a bit scrambled, because I think prior to that, again through Nick, I'd been invited to pitch a few stories for. Yeah, that's right. So Nick and I had pitched a one-off special about Octane. So IDW in the early days did these spotlights, which were these ostensibly self-contained one-off comics that focused on a particular character. So Nick and I pitched Octane. I did a Dinobots pitch as well. Never got anywhere. Anyway, so Wreckers came along, right place, right time, right contact, and and Wreckers went down well, and everything else kind of sprang from there, really. Wow. Yeah, 2009, he and I were working. So the Octane pitch was 2007, I think. 2008 was a fallow year. 2009 was when we started writing Wreckers, and then published in 2010. And there's always been, until last year before, there was always some Transformers comic that I was involved in. Yeah.
Right. That's amazing that IDW took that chance on you, as it were, to kind of
absolutely. I would have done it probably. If I was them. I mean, it was and I'm conscious that it's anomalous, and I always feel it's a bit of a cheat or a letdown when people say to me, "Oh, can you give me some advice on breaking into comics?" Because mine was a combination of luck. Hopefully,
right time, right place.
Right time, right place. Yeah, and I'd never harboured ambitions to write comics either. Really, I mean, I was a massive comics fan and a Transformers fan and a storytelling fan. But it's just most of my stories were prose. Strange combination of things led to it, but worked out.
Was that a huge change in how you wrote, moving to comic books?
Yeah, it was actually. In fact, I remember really clearly when so I did a bit of scripting for issue 1 of Wreckers, and issue 2. It was I don't know how we organised it, but it was my turn to start, to do the first draft or whatever. And I started off, and my first attempt was really overblown. It was far too prosy. It was sort of 80s Marvel stuff, a lot of caption heavy, narration heavy.
Yeah.
and Nick was saying, well, that's not really. We want it punchier than that, and that was good advice. And so second draft, it was much more. I kind of there was a gear shift in my brain. It's like, I get it now. I get how this is supposed to be. I mean, that's not to say More Than Meets the Eye has a reputation. It is quite a dense read. Lots of stuff happens in it. It is quite dialogue heavy.
Yeah.
Whether I made a conscious attempt or not, maybe it was partly because of Jack Lawrence's artwork. Jack came on with Lost Light, the kind of third season. But I think it became less dense with Lost Light. It breathed a bit more in the season 3.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, actually, talking about More Than Meets the Eye and and Lost Light was. I mean, when you pitched More Than Meets the Eye, was the name of that comic kind of mandated, as it were?
Yes, but not in the way you think.
Right.
So Wreckers did well. Certainly defied expectations sales wise. That they did a second printing of the first few issues. I think, to be honest, that IDW at the time, again, not to digress too much, but Wreckers was part of a 3-pronged sort of mini relaunch, bit of a refresh, and they had there was one ongoing series that Mike Costa was going to write, or that he wrote, and then there was a mini series called Bumblebee, which was aimed at younger readers, and then there was Wreckers, which was kind of red meat for the old school fans like us.
Yeah.
and they didn't. I guess they didn't think. Well, either it was because it was Nick and I writing it, and I was certainly an unknown. Nick was a relative unknown. He had 2 stories, one long, one short under his belt. Maybe it was the creators. Maybe they thought it was too niche, but they didn't expect much from Wreckers. It did well. It went down really well. And so Nick and I were thinking, okay, well then let's wait for the phone to ring, so to speak. They'll line us up with something else soon. Mm-hmm. And that did. I mean, the rest of 2010, wore on, and not much was happening. I was lined up to do something called War Stories, which was going to be a digital-only anthology series of 5-page vignettes. And I'd write the bulk of them, and other writers like Simon Furman and so on would come and do other things. So actually, I wrote a lot of synopses for War Story episodes, and then they spiked that for whatever reason. Obviously, it just didn't happen. But I recycled a lot of those ideas into season 1 and 2 of More Than Meets the Eye. But yeah, so War Stories was spiked, and they said, okay, look, the ongoing Transformers thing, that's going to come to an end. Mike Costa's. We're going to do another relaunch. We're going to split. We're going to have 2 ongoings. There's going to be this big event, which kind of splits the cast in 2. Yeah. Half of the cast are going to stay on Cybertron. The other half are going to go off into space. And I remember saying, this was Andy Schmidt at the time, he was the editor, and he sent us this kind of like 3-year plan. And then he said, so there's this split, and then, half the cast here, half the cast in space. And we were like, what's the event that causes that rift, And he was like, we don't know what that is yet. Something's going to happen that's going to be very divisive. And so much so that the working title for that series was Schism. And because X-Men came out with a
I was going to say
at the same time, well, before we got to that point, they beat us to it. So Schism was replaced by Chaos, and then anyway, at that point they said, okay, well, we're going to get Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning to write the space-based one, which is called Robots in Disguise, and we're going to get Mike Costa to do the Cybertron one, which will be called More Than Meets the Eye.
Right.
And then Abnett and Lanning ended up just doing one miniseries for IDW, Heart of Darkness, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, they decided they didn't want to do any more Transformers. Whatever became of them, who knows?
Oh yeah, I've never heard of those guys before.
No, I mean, these poor also-rans went off and disappeared. And then Mike decided he had enough. Maybe, in saying this out loud, I'm sort of getting an insight into the air of desperation at IDW now. when everyone's buggered off, and they're like, Jesus, who can we? This is going through the Rolodex. Like, who have we got left? So Andy asked me to do the space one, and he asked John Barber to write the Cybertron one. And all I had, I didn't pitch it, is what I'm saying. They said to me, there's a space-based quest, and the line was Rodimus and Drift set off to find the Knights of Cybertron.
Oh, right.
So nobody knew what the Knights of Cybertron were, whether they were real or not. Didn't know whether the quest would be successful. Drift was there because he was kind of IDW's breakout new character, Shane McCarthy's character. This is pre-Windblade. I think Windblade supplanted Drift.
Yeah.
although Drift's been in a movie, so we'll see.
Yeah.
So I took that line and poured my heart and soul into it, and I at the moment I've just been going through some old notebooks that I used to write longhand, and I found all these books from the very beginning when I was just churning out all these ideas, and I went back with I think a 12 or 16 issue outline, because we were told, look, don't plan further ahead than that, because who knows if these are going to work.
Yeah.
Low expectations, Mark II there. And then Andy said, oh, you know what, given all the kind of the duplicity and the spying and the double crossing and the sort of more to the point, given all the secrets that are happening within your crew, it makes more sense to call your series More Than Meets the Eye. So that's how it happened.
I see.
You see?
Yeah. Because obviously I would assume that it had always been, well, as you said, it was always going to be More Than Meets the Eye, Robots in Disguise, but they got switched.
Yeah. Two, I say generic, in Transformers terms, two very generic titles, which is why actually I always preferred Lost Light as a as a title.
I was actually saying to Dave earlier when we were talking about talking to you later on today that things like More Than Meets the Eye and Robots in Disguise and all those kind of terms that are just synonymous with Transformers have been reused over and over again. War for Cybertron. Yeah. They've been reused so many times.
Yeah.
That sometimes you're like, well, which More Than Meets the Eye you're talking about?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is better to have a name that is specific, like Lost Light.
Yeah, it loses its flavour, doesn't it, after all? And I think Lost Light is certainly at the time, arguably the first, the only ongoing Transformers series that wasn't either named after a catchphrase or a slogan or a character. So you had Transformers, you had Robots in Disguise, you had More Than Meets the Eye, you had Optimus Prime, but this was the first one where,
Yeah, because I suppose unless you're going to describe the early Furman stuff in IDW, which is like Escalation, etc., but that's more of a strap line, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's it. They were kind of mini-series, weren't they?
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that.
My optics!
So I've been monopolising your time a little bit. So Dave, have you got any questions you'd like to ask?
I don't know. It's I'm still like Orion mentioned earlier. I'm still very new to the comic and the characters in the comic. Like it's, I mean, I've known of the IDW runs and characters popping up and the art style of these characters and stuff, but I haven't really had the time to sit down and read like a full arc of these characters.
It's
quite
because you're a good case study actually, Dave, because you're when the we'll dissect you intellectually. When IDW were doing this relaunch with the two the two titles, obviously the Holy Grail is new readers. Maybe lapsed Transformers fans, great, we'll take what we can get, but the Holy Grail is, non-Transformers comics fans that give it a go. And, it's funny, again, looking back, they spent a lot on the launch. I mean, we got the cover of previews that month. And we did well by Transformers comic standards of the IDW era, because, there was the Dreamwave launch from 2001 or 2002, which got to number one, sold 100,000 copies, which is incredible in every sense of the word. But 2012, it wasn't quite those heights. So I don't know how. I'm not going to ask you how old you were at the time, but were you a Transformers fan 10 years ago? Were you a comics fan 10 years ago? What was on your radar?
Say around that time I would have been ending college, going to university, so I was definitely into comics and the franchises that were big at the time, and Transformers was definitely one of them. But I've always
Just couldn't get you, could we? Couldn't reach you.
Yeah.
Just couldn't reach
no.
you.
I saw at the time. I just don't think I ever. It wasn't in my wheelhouse at the time because I studied video games design at the time, and it wasn't towards my final year when I started to really get the influence of robots in my projects and stuff. And I think that's when I started to know about the two different comics going on and seeing them in comic book shops and stuff when I was looking for research for visuals. But apart from that,
okay,
no, not at the time.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, at the time, I was said balls deep. I was
whatever comes next is going to be a disappointment. Carry on.
I was reading a lot of comics at the time,
right?
But I was reading a lot of Marvel, DC, and Image, and I had read the early IDW stuff, and there was a point in the IDW stuff where I think also because I was burnt by the Dreamwave stuff, kind of collapsing.
Right.
There was a point in that like phase one, as it were, where I felt that it wasn't that it was bad, but there was a kind of a dip in kind of quality and continuity, and I was like getting too confused, so I kind of dropped Transformers and I wasn't reading it. And then when your title came out and they split them into two, I was I jumped ship.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until people started saying to me, "You need to read More Than Meets the Eye. You'll really like it." And listening to other podcasts about comics and saying like, this is a really good comic book in its own right, not just as a Transformers comic book. It's worth reading as a comics fan.
That's always really good to hear.
Yeah, I think it was. Well, I'll give credit where credit's due. I think it was House of Astonish that. Got me on
Good,
may
good lads.
Yeah, you may have met them before, I imagine.
Yes, they're good guys.
Yeah. So I came to it late, but I started devouring it. So.
Well, I mean, I wasn't. Cards on the table. I didn't pick up any of the Dreamwave stuff. I wasn't with IDW at the start. I took notice when Nick started getting work there. And I mean, I guess I was just out of. I mean, I'm in Guernsey really. We've had one comic shop. It lasted about 3 weeks, and that was when Spider-Man came out in 1990 or whatever it was. You know,
wow.
Just 3 days before the bubble burst or whatever. So it's hard to get stuff. And it was just passing me by. And I was and I'm a fan of Furman stuff. And I think he and fair play to him. You know, when IDW approached him and said, "Look, we're starting again," or when IDW got the license and said, "Right, we're building something," he went for a self-described kind of Ultimates vibe, really. You know, he took a slow burning approach, and and it was probably braver and bolder than it seemed at the time, even. But I'm not being disrespectful for IDW, bless them, but I think they were new to the license, and this was, I think I've talked about this before, but we're talking 2005, and in internet terms, that's a long time ago. I mean, people have been online for nearly a decade, but it was still that era of message boards, and the distance between the audience or the readers and the creators, or the readers and the comic company, was really short. And so you'd get instant feedback. You'd get very vociferous fans. And I think IDW thought, crikey, some fans aren't liking this element of it. Specifically, that they didn't like the too many humans, too much on Earth, and so they rushed. They went for the War Within.
But they rushed. Didn't they rush out Stormbringer as well?
That's it. That's what I'm thinking of. Stormbringer, because War Within was Dreamwave.
Yes,
wasn't
it was. Yeah.
Stormbringer, which, and this is not to comment on the quality of Stormbringer, but it sort of introduced kind of a second strand of storytelling, and then you had the Spotlights, which were doing the same, and it became quite a lot of ironically, given the kind of Ultimates inspiration, part of which was saying, look, you don't need there's no flashbacks here, you don't need to have read 50 issues before. I think phase one of IDW's Transformers, you did actually have to have your wits about you to try to follow and to connect the various.
You essentially had to read it all.
Yeah. And so So and yeah, anyway, so I digress again. But I mean, it was when Nick got involved, I paid attention, and I did like it, and went back and read the Escalation and Infiltration like that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, 2012 was intended to be a jumping on point, and I really, looking back over the sort of nearly 10 years of being involved, it was really good. No disrespect, of course, to the long-standing fans, but there was an extra sweet kind of scent for desperate ones, for a better phrase, actually. But it was extra good when a brand new sort of reader joined, and they had no foreknowledge of Transformers. They were checking out the book because they'd heard it was a good book in and of itself.
Yeah.
And that worked for me. Worked for IDW, and I remember that what's remarkable to me is how many young fans jumped on board then, or young readers that weren't yet Transformers fans.
Yeah.
And from my perspective as a convention goer, and as someone that did signings and got engaged with fans online and stuff, there was a shift in the kind of reading demographic then. It started to skew younger. I mean, we're talking sort of teens, as opposed to people like me. and it became far more diverse. At the most kind of basic level, the sort of the main gender split. So it became less predominantly men reading it.
Yeah.
And then the sort of second dimension to the diversity, there was a far more engaged LGBTQ component to the readership too. And that was all fantastic, and it kind of really, experiencing it at the time, thankfully one was alert to it and could appreciate it as it was happening. But over the sort of 6, 7, 8 years that it was being published, that the makeup of convention attendees shifted from where I was sitting. The type of people I was speaking to and talking to and giving interviews to and signing comics for, there was far more diversity.
So you mentioned the LGBTQ readers. Was that something that came about due to some of the stuff that was in your writing, or was that something that influenced your writing? Because I know you did a lot of stuff on like it being a kind of homonormative society with most Transformers are male, so why wouldn't they have same-sex relationships?
This is it. That was my go-to kind of explanation, or I hesitate to say justification, because one shouldn't have to justify it.
No.
But Michael Kelly, who was our liaison at Hasbro, so the approval process was, you'd write a script, it would go to editorial at IDW, then there might be notes, and then it would go up to Hasbro for sign off, and it would be Michael Kelly who was doing the signing off. And early on, he said to us via editorial, he said, "Look, we really want to humanize the characters. Obviously, they're still robots, but we want them to be engaging. We want readers to sort of relate to them," which was intensely complementary to what I wanted to do with the book, because I wanted it to be unashamedly character driven and kind of high hard sci-fi as well, or high concept sci-fi.
Yeah.
And sort of a bit sitcom-y, a bit light-hearted when it needed to be. So to have Michael and Hasbro sort of pushing in the same direction was great. But my other go-to argument when I did have to try and explain why we were telling these type of stories was that the whole franchise is predicated or premised on a conflict which itself is rooted in antagonism and hate and things and whatever. So if you're going to tell stories about a society which is defined by that emotion, then why isn't every other emotion represented somewhere? There's going to be love as well. They're going to love each other, and because they're about 99.9% male coded, then it's going to be male on male loving.
Yeah, obviously.
Obviously. So I didn't have any particular audience in mind when I was writing it. So I didn't think, right, I want to win over the LGBTQ community. I wrote stories about flawed and real characters, and I wrote love stories, and that piqued the interest of people that wouldn't normally read Transformers comics.
Yeah.
And then it became like a virtuous circle. So you'd get, you'd hear lovely things from readers that got something out of it, and they were kind of championing the book, and they were extolling its virtues to people. And that gave me confidence to tell more of that type of story,
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that's what I noticed. Like, loads of people were really, really positive. I mean, obviously you get a bunch of negative so-and-sos, but loads of people were really, really positive about the whole stuff. I found, unless you go to the deepest, darkest parts of internet forums.
Yeah, no, that was my experience too. And I mean, and the deepest, darkest dwellers could have, they knew where to find me, but very, very few people.
Yeah,
very, very few people were openly critical to my face anyway about it. I mean, I think that yes, about other things, fine, but not so much about the gay content.
So you didn't get too much resistance from editorial or the fandom on doing this stuff then?
No, it would make a better anecdote if I said yes, but no. To be truthful, I anticipated pushback is unfair. I thought to myself, okay, look, this is abnormal. This is out the ordinary. So I'm going to preemptively explain why I think it's a good idea. This is specifically in relation to the Chrome Dome and Rewind declaration of love.
Yeah.
So I did write a kind of mini or a mini essay or an extended note at the end of the script saying, kind of in defense of quote unquote, I love you. Mm-hmm. And it was basically a version of what I said to you just now about, obviously there must be, the existence of love in that universe must be a thing. But, didn't, no pushback, nothing except just either sort of silent support or vocal support,
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it was really good. And I'm thinking that was the beginning from my perspective of, of kind of that journey. And as this book went on, I mean, there was other sort of same-sex characters. With Lost Light, we introduced two trans characters.
Yeah,
again,
Anode
there was never any
Lug.
Anode and Lug, and there was never any hesitancy, with IDW or Hasbro. So fair play to everyone involved.
Yeah. And I thought the way that you slipped that in there was really, like, it wasn't overstated. It was just kind of just there, which is exactly how it should be.
Well, I'm glad you think so. I mean, I've always been aware. You might hear my cat meowing,
No
even
worries.
though he has been fed, haven't you? You might hear him purring. That isn't me. That's the cat.
Well,
That's purring
my cat's litter tray is in this room, so if you hear some rummaging, then it's the same. But go ahead.
I've thrown myself off the sand. Yeah, right. So I was always conscious, really, of a couple of things. So I'm the most boring, straightforward, heterosexual, cis guy, and white to boot, and middle class, and all the rest of it. So very upper echelons of privilege. And I can't write from experience on these things. That's the first thing. Secondly, I really don't like when, if you're going to write LGBTQ characters, I personally don't like it when that element of their existence becomes the story
or their character.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it should be incidental, unless you've got a particular, unless there's a particular point you want to make, whatever. I wanted it, as we were saying, it was always intended to be a normal part of their society. So I suppose even if I'd wanted to sort of tell a story which in some way there was an element of prejudice or bigotry or something within the universe that it was playing out in, that would have been difficult anyway to contrive. And at the same time, I didn't want to make it completely incidental either. There was never going to be any stories which hinged on a relationship being same sex.
Yeah, because like I say, I mean, I think that it wasn't even that we knew what sex the two characters were at first, really, and then it kind of came along, and then there was a scene in a bar, I think, with with Anode and Lug, and Anode was talking to someone and just kind of basically kind of quite plainly said, "Oh, it's she these days," you know.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they're talking to Wipeout on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. It was important that the scene played out like that. In fact, when there was a concerted effort to bring more female characters into the storylines in Dark Cybertron, and that was co-written with John Barber, and we wanted to have. I mean, I created Nautica and Velocity, and they were going to arrive with. Well, Windblade was already, I believe. God, it's fun. It's scary how the memories start to blur.
Wasn't she?
Yeah, as I sit on the porch here in my my assisted living home, just trying to remember. So Elita 1, right? Yeah, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
God, this is terrible. It was the last podcast he did, and then that's it. You can't get any sense out of him after that. We tied an onion to our belt, as was the thing. No, so I wanted. So we were alternating issues more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my issue that these female characters, are going to be introduced.
Yeah.
And in this case, Nautica and Velocity, that nobody would have seen before. And I wanted Alex, who was doing the art then, to draw them as, if you like, male coded physiques, So they wouldn't have the hips, they wouldn't have the bust, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because so I didn't want their femaleness to be revealed until down the line and in an incidental way, because there's arguments for and against, I suppose, but I've always been a little bit like when I had an opportunity to introduce Nickel in Lost Light. Oh no, actually it was prior to that, wasn't it? Anyway, when Nickel came along, I wanted her to be non-female coded. She's just a sort of a bulky, blocky.
Yeah.
Could be a guy. Anyway, but understandably, IDW said, look, if we're making a sort of a big thing about how these are female characters, then we'd like it to be apparent.
Yeah.
At the end of this issue, when they make a big appearance, that otherwise it's just two new characters. Just two extra blokes that have sailed down or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Lug and Anode, again, I wanted. I suppose in a weird way, it's just my. It's not to get too pretentious or whatever or sentimental, but it's kind of a reflection of how I hope and still hope things will end up in real life in the end. That it's just it doesn't warrant any comment.
It's a non-issue.
It's a non-issue, exactly. So and I wanted that nonchalance to come across in the story, and Wipeout, it doesn't bat an eye. He registers that the gender, the pronoun's different than he was used to. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, it's no biggie.
Yeah, exactly. That's what. Yeah, it just, like I say, slipped in there and just move on, carry on with the story. And exactly. I loved it. I thought it was great because.
Oh, good.
I honestly, I mean, I was aware of the kind of Chrome Dome rewind stuff before I started reading, but I had no idea there was going to be trans characters in it. And yeah, it was like, well, great. It's good that it's just treated like normal, as it should be.
Exactly. It should be exactly. Yeah.
Did you get any say in which characters could be pulled to do that with, or you just have freedom with it?
I mean, that's interesting because it never occurred to me. It never occurred to me to take a pre-existing character and have that as a reveal, if you like. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have been against it. That would have been quite interesting, actually. But no, with Anode and Lug, they were original creations of mine. Mm-hmm. And I needed, when I was planning the Lost Light, what I call season 3, when I was planning that season, I knew I needed certainly Anode. I needed a character, an adventurer, who was an expert in kind of sort of in natal issues, in birthing and all that. So I needed, because there wasn't anyone that fitted that bill already. So I was creating a new character. I was determined that we take diversity. We continue to have a very diverse cast. So it just married up quite neatly.
Cool.
Yeah. Although that's moving away from the LGBT slightly. I have given existing characters new personalities, and that my portrayal of Starsaber was far more controversial than anything to do with same-sex relationships or trans characters.
Yes.
There was I did upset, not intentionally, although arguably I should have foreseen it, but I did upset Star Saber fans who liked him.
So, but fans of him in Victory and so on, or
that's right, yeah, the Japanese anime, and where he was almost a Thunderclash style character. He was absolutely a hero, and I'd made him into a kind of embittered atheist, embittered evangelist,
zealot,
killer pilgrim.
Talking of Thunderclash, I love the character of Thunderclash and how kind of the whole kind of idea of him just being everyone's hero. It was fantastic. And it rubbed Rodimus up the wrong way, which is also cool.
We kind of needed rubbing Rodimus up the wrong way was always fun, and Megatron did that a lot. And it was nice of Nick in Last Spot Standing to have kind of a nod to Thunderclash's enduring status as the greatest of all time. I was determined actually to never. I made it a rule that I would never reveal any flaw in Thunderclash's character. Because normally you get they're too good to be true, and there's some terrible secret. I thought, no, he really is that good.
Yeah. There's no point at which you think that he's a wrong one. No, no. He's absolutely great. Even when he's kind of being a
self-insert,
and when he's wrong, it's only because his mind's being controlled or whatever.
Exactly. Give him a break. He was manipulated. Poor guy.
So, I mean, I did ask a few friends if they had any questions for you, because I meet a few people in a pub, and we take our Transformers down and we talk Transformers.
Oh, yeah.
And a friend called Chrissy did ask whether having, like, robots as your main cast allow the human stories between characters to hit on an emotional level that might have worked better than if they were actually human.
Yeah, that's true. That's interesting. I certainly never sort of missed a human. I never wanted for a human character, and I absolutely did. I think from the beginning see them as. I was going to say see them as human characters. I just saw them as characters happen to be made of metal, and I think I know for some people, there wasn't enough actual transforming that went on. But I would say, I would argue that I tried to make the fact they could transform kind of more of a what did that ability mean for their society? What does it mean for their religion? What does it mean for how they perceive themselves, as opposed to having them actually transform in the comic too much. I mean, controversially, that was never the appeal to me, really. I mean, toys, yes, but as characters, their ability to change shape was cool, but it wasn't. I wasn't sort of devouring the pages, waiting for that moment where something would turn into something else. And also, selfishly, it can potentially take up valuable page space as well. Obviously, I mean, the character of Rung, and the mystery of Rung was entirely built around his mysterious alt mode. So we did. I've introduced a criticism that I'm defending now. I realise that wasn't something you did. But no, I think not having humans made it. There was a how with Doctor Who, you've got kind of the companion is kind of the audience surrogate. They get a new companion, and it's and actually in universe, that's why the Doctor does it, so they can see the universe, they can see the universe through the companion's eyes, and you kind of get like a companion perspective on things. Sometimes in Transformers, that's what the humans function as being. But with an all robot cast, the sort of the prevailing perspective is kind of robot on robot. That is, it's a robot emotional scale, which becomes a human emotional scale, because there's no that is kind of it's exclusively robot. It's exclusively robot characters. So that's a long-winded way of saying that Chrissy's right, and that is that it did it helped me. I think it helped to sort of sell them as emotional beings.
Yeah, I agree, and they do feel more human. I mean, obviously you've got the Transformer element, they do transform, and then there's all the stuff about functionism and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely transformery things in there, but they do feel like kind of fleshed out human being characters, really, in their kind of like the way they talk and the way they act. And obviously with a character like Swerve, who's kind of like, he felt to me like a kind of connective tissue between the reader and the book. Mostly because he's breaking the fourth wall.
Well, yeah. This is it. And I was about to say, he kind of, he or I, he has his cake and eats it. And I suppose I do too, really. We kind of, at least I see I've reverted to we now. I'm distancing myself from the criticism. At least that was a plot point itself, was him activating the sort of meta bomb.
Yes, the meta bomb, yeah.
At which point you can kind of, on some level, sense that there's
yes.
I mean, and that prevails right till the penultimate issue of Lost Light, when he's when it seems like all the story's wrapped up and somebody says, "Oh, so that's it, the quest is finished, are we done?" And his is the last panel. He's above the "to be continued" or "to be concluded" sort of caption. He's like, and he sort of, the implication is he can sense it says that, so he's kind of, well, no, we're not quite done. But
yeah.
But actually, I think if I defy anybody that writes anything to not find fault in it, and I would possibly have what's the word? Eased off on some of the pop culture stuff, partly because it dates it. And sometimes it is a bit dissonant. I mean, I think I was going for a sort of phonogram vibe when we had that kind of Earth disco thing.
I was going to bring this up,
and that's probably my inner comic reader wanting to write, because 9 times out of 10, the fact that they're robots doesn't prevent me from telling the type of stories I want to. But if I want to write about a disco or something, or a nightclub, or people going on a pub crawl. I kind of did that with issue 13, didn't I? But there's sometimes where there's limitations because of their transformerness. So I tried to have it both ways with that kind of Earth disco, where they're playing all these 80s indie pop hits and stuff. So I may have done that differently.
That leads very nicely into like the soundtrack that you issued on Twitter through through Twitter posts and so on. And I had listened to some of those songs, and like, was that in any way influenced by Phonogram and Kieran Gillen? Because he did a lot of that with things like Young Avengers and Wicked and Divine and so on.
Yeah, it wasn't, not directly. I mean, I was a Phonogram. I am a fan of him generally. I'm particularly a fan of the Phonogram stuff. And I know that he and I are probably exactly the same age, and we were both TF UK readers, and we were both into the same music. Yeah. Both into the same music, and so I think our tastes overlap quite a lot. Yeah. But I didn't know that I read Young Avengers in trade, and I didn't know that he was in the habit of sort of saying these are songs that.
He did publish a few soundtracks, I think, in the letters page or something at some point.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. But all right. Well, no. So I just wondered if it was either complete accident that the two of you doing something similar, or I mean, with you being a fan as well. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a fair assumption to make. I think back when I was doing the fan fiction stuff, I tend to have certain songs that I'd associate with it wouldn't necessarily be, these are the songs I'm listening to as I write it, but I would associate certain songs with certain stories, and that just carried over into more than MTMTE. And also it was a way of a bit of sort of audience engagement, and it would and a bit of pre-release hype, and it would put people in the right mood, and it was an excuse to show off music I thought was good. So,
well, it's been a way of selling the comic to my other half, because she's a massive Britpop. She's a massive Britpop fan, and so I was like, well, there's Scott Walker, Pulp, Dexys, Kinnicky, and she's like, oh, okay, yeah, great.
Someone did a very good, very exhaustive. So the cat is testing his claws on my very thin T-shirt at the moment. A guy did a comprehensive Spotify playlist of more than meets the eye.
Yeah,
tracks.
I found it.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was listening to a bit of it earlier, actually. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and funnily enough, amazingly, at the end of Lost Light, a collection of fans and a band wrote a song about Lost Light.
Really?
Which you can find on Spotify. Actually, I'll send you a link after this.
Oh, cool.
Cool. and it's got a massed choir of readers as well. They did like a global, sing along, which and it's pretty jangly. It's nicely jangly. It ticks my boxes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's definitely the era of music that I was most into growing up as well. So like Britpop was a big part of me. Like, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was good to hear all that stuff and see that you were into similar kind of music.
Yeah, we dropped a few names in the actual issues as well, but.
Yeah, my other half, she's a massive fan of Divine Comedy, and when I showed her that like Tonight We Fly was on the that playlist, she was like, "Yeah, brilliant."
Well, I nearly called the last issue of Lost Light Tonight We Fly, actually.
Oh, really?
And in fact, I came close to commissioning. There was a fan that did really good, obviously fan-made videos that she do occasionally in support of storylines, and I went as far as, I don't know how familiar you are with the song actually, but there's an extended sequence where Neil lists all the different occupations.
Yes, I know the song very well. She's played it to me a million times. Yeah. And also I love it. It's a great song.
It is a great song. Yeah. So that bit when he's going through all the different characters, if you like, and it was very nearly a More Than Meets the Eye character that fitted each of those.
Brilliant.
And of course, the sort of the cheat would have been farmer for the farmer, PH.
Uh-huh.
So that was
perfect.
But yes, anyway, it didn't happen in the end. But that's
it's a shame. I mean, and talking of things that I love,
yes.
I'm a massive fan of Justice League International.
Right, yeah. Was
that you, or was that more the artists that chose to do the covers that way?
No, that was me, 100%. I JLI is the biggest influence on More Than Meets the Eye, arguably. In fact, I think it's probably.
I had a feeling.
Yeah. So Justice League International and early Red Dwarf and X-Files to an extent, in terms of the kind of the slow burning myth arc stuff.
Yeah,
those are probably the biggest sort of pop culture hallmarks, and maybe New Who to an extent, RTD's Who.
Yeah.
Oh, Moffat's actually to but that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, no, Justice League International. I said before we didn't have a comic shop over here, and we didn't. But there was a newsagent opposite one of the schools that always had the DC imports in, and I went in there and found Justice League Europe issue 1. So in 1989-ish, maybe 1990 actually. But the London Egmont, is it Edgemont? Fleetway subsidiary.
Oh, yeah.
Would reprint the they do a Superman comic and a Batman comic, and I think it was Superman had the JLI reprint in. Anyway, that's how I came by them, those stories. And they aren't underrated because everybody justifiably raves about them, and they are rightly recognized as a sort of as a pivotal and highly influential comic series, because they, to me, as a relatively new comics fan, 2 or 3 years into it, I mean, my comics were kind of Simon Furman's wonderfully kind of space opera histrionic stuff, or the 2000 AD kind of irreverent sort of political cyberpunky stuff.
Yeah,
and or the kind of like the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and Justice League International. I'd never seen superheroes acting so much like ordinary people.
Yeah,
but more to the point, stories which foregrounded other things other than the fight. And I know there'll be people listening to this and saying, "Oh God, yeah, but Spider-Man and the whole that's what set Marvel apart," and that's right. But I'd never seen an ensemble book that was so much about just the interdynamics, the interactions between the characters.
Oh, I agree completely.
Yeah, and that was funny. That was funny, and that. I mean, oh God, if you're probably better versed in this than I am, but I mean, there was there not an issue? Mate, God, it might have been Peter David's X Factor actually. Anyway, there was.
I'm also a big fan of that.
Yeah.
Love it.
So one of those series, there was like a subplot which was just the inability to open a jar of mayonnaise, And it's like, yeah, that's the type of thing which I want to read about.
Absolutely, no. I mean, I came obviously. I was way too young to read it when it came out. Really, well, I guess I wasn't, but I wasn't reading DC comics at all at the time.
Yeah,
like I came to it a lot later, and I thought it was fantastic. I mean, my favorite character is now Booster Gold due to that. When people ask me what my favorite superhero is, and I go Booster Gold, and they're like, who?
Well, I've mentioned before that I was looking over some old notebooks, and there's multiple references to Blue Beetle and Booster Gold analogues within, the fact there needed to be, and it was going to be Swerve and Tailgate. Actually, we never really developed that too much in the end, but I knew
it sort of started that way, didn't it?
It did, didn't it? There you go. So they were going to get into various mini adventures or hijinks and things. But to go back to your question, so I mean, I'm quite proud of this, even though it's become so hackneyed. But the idea of homaging JLI 1 was with More Than Meets the Eye 1 was just, to my mind, a very simple way of sending a signal to non-Transformers fans.
Yeah,
this is the vibe, This is not your normal Transformers book. And we talked before about Lost Light being unusual in having a title which is not, a sort of genericized TF term or a character name. But there'd never been an ensemble book before, not an ongoing series, which was about a group of characters.
Yeah.
The ongoings had always been, okay, the May had started off small, but they were forever building outwards and focusing on new characters, often because of the toys coming out.
Yeah.
So I wanted to really lean into that. It was a found family story, bunch of losers on a ship. There's the Red Dwarf reference. And hopefully emulating the kind of JLI sensibilities. So, but it's amazing how many people, again, the younger generation fans that came onto it, years later, they'll see Justice League International 1 and think, oh, right. Right, okay. That wasn't a fantastic original idea that James and Nick had. That was, a tip of the hat.
Yeah. I was very impressed with it. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, well, there you go. This is the book for me then. Like,
well, there you go.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I was very pleased to see that.
My optics!
So, I mean, your comics, More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Eye, have had quite an impact on the fandom. So much as there's now like a wealth of expensive toys for me to buy. Have you seen many of those? Are you aware of all that?
I am. When we were mapping out Dark Cybertron, John Barber and I got an invitation to go to Rhode Island and meet Hasbro and talk it through, And when I was there, I got to go and see the kind of the R&D, design rooms and things, and got to look in this massive A1 folders where they had the kind of the very beginnings of ideas for what characters they were going to do toys about. And I remember seeing that they had Brainstorm planned, and that is, people know this, but that is a 100% More Than Meets the Eye Alex Mill Brainstorm design.
Yeah.
And so in these massive folders, there was like an overblown panel from issue 2 of when he's standing next to or Shock or whoever, melted into the engine room. So then there was a Tailgate, there was a Swerve, and I've nothing but love for third-party companies, but I'm still old school enough that it's an extra special kind of frizzle when it's an official figure based on.
Of course.
And there's two levels. There's kind of the aforementioned sort of Brainstorm. There's the fact that Swerve was reissued. A new version of Swerve came out, new version of Tailgate, etc., etc. That's all fantastic. But the real humdinger is when it's an original character that gets turned into an official Hasbro release. So we've had Nautica, albeit she was a recolor, but nonetheless we had a named Nautica toy. We had Minimus Ambus as part of a Ultra Magnus toy, and then
I wonder what came first with that one. So it was you guys first that?
Yes, that's right. And then Rung in the end. We had a tiny Rung official Rung figure.
Yeah, was it a headmaster or something? Or?
It was it turns into, it looks like
a battle master.
It turns into a gun, doesn't it? Target Master, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have to allow Dave to tell me what this is because he buys modern toys more than I do. But so what was it? It was a Battle Master, was it?
A Battle Master.
Okay,
yeah.
that's the official Battle Master TM.
I mean, you can't accuse me of designing characters with a view to getting toys made, because I would have had Rung turn into something that a kid wants to play with.
Yes,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
And then Nickel came out as a non-transforming but official toy with Tarn.
Of course.
So Nickel and Tarn.
Super 7.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's coming out soon. I think it's
That's oh, it's not out yet.
Yeah, it's impressive that they haven't done a Rodimus in the style of IDW as of yet.
No, I think there's, maybe Dave can tell. I think there's a because Flame Toys is kind of it's an officially sanctioned.
I've got it.
Oh yes,
I have it.
He's got it.
Of course. I forget that Flame Toys. I know it's a third party, but it's an official third party.
Yes, that's right.
So, yeah. No, yes, they do, and it's a beautiful figure. Yeah.
It's lovely, isn't it? And I think they did a Megatron.
Yep, I've got that too. I've got a little cabinet just over here with all my More Than Meets the Eye people in. Some of them are third party. But I'll send you a photo later.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
But yeah, I've got Megatron in there. I've got Rodimus from Flame Toys, and then I've got a bunch of third party stuff like Chrome Dome and Rewind and so on.
The third party stuff is fantastic, and I've got a Rung, third party Rung.
Yeah, as have I.
I got a third party Swerve with My First Blaster, and an Iron Fist going right back to Wreckers. But I generally don't. It's a bit like original artwork. I mean, I if I started, I wouldn't know when to finish. In terms of collecting.
It's a minefield, absolute minefield.
It's a minefield. And also Tarn crossed over into Cyberverse, didn't he? He was or the Cyberverse Adventures.
Actually. Yeah. A friend of mine, another friend that I go to the pub with, asked me this question. So that cuts into this quite well. It's just how much ownership do you have on a character like Rung or Tarn? Yeah. And do you have much say on how they're represented in toys or cartoons like Cyberverse?
So basically, when you so all the IDW work is on a sort of work for hire basis. So I'm going to say this crudely. It's not to be aggressive, but it's just you sign everything away at that point. Everything.
It's standard comics procedure, really, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So so there's no trace of rancor in that. It's just that's how it works. So everything that's created, actually, it's obviously not owned by IDW. It's owned by Hasbro. To do with this, they see fit, and actually that's useful to me as a kind of TFUK historian or archivist or whatever, doing the classics trades, being able to go to Hasbro, or rather IDW being able to go to Hasbro and say, basically any comic material produced under license, it's Hasbro's to do with as they want. So the new licensee, whoever that is, will, if they choose, would be able to do like an omnibus edition of More Than Meets the Eye or Robots in Disguise or whatever. They could repurpose any of the older material for new audiences. So we will,
like IDW did with the Marvel stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
They reissued it and so on.
Little plug actually. So I've just finished the final contents of the best of the rarities special. So it's a one-off. It's not so IDW. It's August best of the rarities, 100 pages of very rare, hard to find Transformers ephemera stories and artwork and bits and bobs. So,
cool!
Check it out.
I will do. Yeah. So what you've been compiling you've been creating it, curating it.
Curating, yeah. So we did the TFUK Classics. We did 5 volumes of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then we were going to do 8. And there was a 6th volume was underway, but it wasn't to be. And I tried to resurrect it. I spoke to IDW and said to see whether there was any appetite to sort of do 6 at least. And it kind of nearly happened, and it didn't. But then David Marriott said, "Look, we are planning a special, which is just going to showcase harder to find stories." And long story short, I ended up being allowed to sort of decide or at least recommend what went in there. And so we have got some rare stories in there. We've also got some, like I say, original artwork and some kind of deleted scenes. There's artwork from a US comic that was never published.
Oh,
and there is something which I can't talk about, but there is a world exclusive in there. There's all new comic strips in continuity from a certain time. Like you will
fantastic.
see. But yeah, so it's.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that now. Yeah, great.
There you go. I've hyped it up.
You have.
A real pro
Well
there. I've plugged my new album.
You've also done a fantastic job of preempting my next 2 questions. So
Happy to help.
That's out of the way. Like I was going to ask about IDW losing the license, and
oh yeah,
and then I was going to ask you what you were working on right now. So
yeah, so the IDW have got the license till the end of the year. I don't know. I honestly don't know for certain who has got it next.
There was rumours about Robert Kirkman's Skybound, I think, but like that was...
Yes, yeah, no, I've heard those too. And before between now and the end of the year, you've got the rest of Nick Roach's Last Bot Standing, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
There's the aforementioned Rarities book. There's another special like that coming out about focusing on another aspect. There's something in the Rarities book. I'm going to be careful here, which speaks to a project that was going to happen before the end of the year, which is no longer happening. So there was a plan. So some plans work out, others don't. I would have been involved in those plans had they happened. Which is a bridge to your next question. I haven't got anything much exciting to say, to be honest. I've got in a lovely situation with IDW where they're always open to talk, and they're always open to pitches.
Mm-hmm.
The much as I loved writing More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light, and there would have been a longer season 3. I think I've already said in the past that we probably would have wound up. Lost Light probably would have wound up around issue 50 anyway. Naturally, would have reached its end, and that would have been the right time. It couldn't have gone on forever. But I took a break from Transformers after that. I did a mini called Starcadia Quest,
yeah,
which was a bit similar themes really. And there was a couple of other things which nearly happened, didn't. The short answer is I can't tell you anything exciting. I've not retired completely, and I would like to do something. I mean, I've got the itch. This project which nearly happened but didn't made me kind of hungry to do comic stuff again. So we will see. In the meantime,
watch this space.
Watch this space, yeah. And then,
have you ever thought of writing like outside of comic books, like TV or? I mean, I think I saw an interview with you once on YouTube where they spoke about the possibility of like a More Than Meets the Eye TV show or cartoon. Or
yeah, there was talk years ago of a Last Under the Wreckers adaptation, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
And then more recently, there was there's always talk of this stuff, and I really I'm loath to kind of talk about stuff unless I'm certain it's going to happen, so otherwise I mention it.
Yeah,
hence is something which
jinx it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's potentially embarrassing as well because you kind of big it up and then it sort of fizzles out. But I don't. I mean, I'm not hinting at anything here, but I'm just observing that, like all of pop culture these days, for better or worse, is about self-cannibalization, isn't it? It's about reboots. It's about mining that IP to death. It's about picking something and running with it. Picking a pre-existing concept or idea and turning it into something else. So I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be very happy if elements of More Than Meets the Eye or Lost Light found their way into a different medium at some point. But like I say, I'm not. That's not like a little wink there. I who knows what's going on? But it was nice to see Tarn crossover. In the absence of a full-blown adaptation, it would be just nice to see the More Than Meets the Eye's legacy in the shape of some original characters carrying over into different media, or existing characters that were kind of redefined in my series, appearing in that incarnation in other things. So if we had like a fast talking piss-taking Swerve somewhere else. That'd be nice. I'd take that. I'll accept that.
I think that's entirely possible. I mean, some of the characters that were created in your books were those character traits have stuck for a lot of people. So I would have thought that I can't see it not happening. Yeah.
Well, we were in between takes. We were talking, weren't we, about the Divine Comedy, and Neil Hannon has he's done the songs for the Wonka prequel, hasn't he? Which is directed by the Paddington director.
Yes,
whose name I forget. Oh. And in various interviews, Hannon says, this director was and is a big Divine Comedy fan and grew up with Divine Comedy, and now he's in a position of power and influence. He can act on it. So I'm just hoping that somebody that grew up with More Than Meets the Eye will one day be in a position of power and influence and can,
It's cyclical, isn't it? I mean, you see it happen. You see it happening in Transformers.
Well, that's exactly right. It's very neatly taken us back to the beginning of this conversation when, myself and Nick Roach and Jack Lawrence, and John Paul Bove, all grew up with Transformers UK and all ended up, working professionally with Transformers. And weirdly, Jack, Nick, and myself were all in Transmasters UK. That tiny little fan club in the 90s. So I don't know. Yeah. But as you say, things are cyclical. And one of the best things about not to get too complicated, but the IDW2, so the latest continuity, the rebooted stuff, 2018 onwards.
Yeah.
The best bit has been seeing fans that grew up with More Than Meets the Eye and Robots in Disguise, getting their big break professionally, the artists, and getting to do covers and getting to do interiors. So it never ends, as Furman would say. It's all the next generation is built on the platform.
Well, I mean, he's the perfect example of someone who's kind of been round and round and round on the Transformers merry-go-round, as it were.
Absolutely, yeah. 30 years in 2025. Yeah.
Pretty much.
40 years, actually. 40 years, God.
Well, I mean, I think we've taken up a lot of your time. So, unless have you got any other questions, Dave, before we wrap up?
I guess it's just the standard type of questions that I'm sure some people always want to know from the creator. It's like, do you have any characters that you favoured more than others, or any that you didn't like in the end, or the change?
Oh, wow. Well, you know what? Ones I didn't like in the end. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. That's an interesting one. So I'm going to buy myself some time by answering the other question. I think I liked writing Megatron a lot, even though when we first, back at that Rhode Island brainstorming session, when it was first decided that Megatron maybe could become an Autobot, that was terrifying conceptually, because I just didn't know how that could be, how I could pull that off convincingly, and maybe I didn't, but gave it a good shot. So that he was always, there's certain characters, and in fact, not to get too meta about it, but I did, I made it a plot point in the end. Megatron and Rodimus are two characters that they're the center of gravity in a room. Really, they're very charismatic. They're very enticing from a writer's perspective. They're very fun to write, and so we had that personality tick story where the sheer power of their charisma causes these parasites to overdose. So so Rodimus, Megatron, Magnus was always good to write. Swerve was fun. Whirl, of course. Whirl was a big one. Whirl was really good.
Love Whirl. I love Whirl. Love him.
And characters that I suppose in a way, if I hadn't enjoyed writing them, unless they were pivotal, I probably would have just featured them less. So I invite listeners to go and do their research and see which ones sort of faded out a little bit as the series went on. I think the cast did become too big to give everybody the time they deserved. So there was kind of some people did recede a little bit into the background, and we did. I don't know why I keep flitting between we and I when it comes to the writing. I did, I sort of removed some characters altogether for a bit and then brought them back to give others a chance to shine. I didn't, because season 3 was curtailed. I don't think the Anode and Lug got the attention that they should have had in the end. I always struggled to give Velocity enough time. First Aid as well. I would have liked to have done more with him. And there was always, the plan was always to do another 5-part Scavengers adventures, or to give them a real kind of mini series within the ongoing series. You know?
Yeah, I always wanted to see more of the Scavengers.
But that got compressed into a 2-parter in the end. But
I mean, Dave's got all this to look forward to. I don't think he's got as far as seeing the Scavengers as yet. So
well, when you get
no, I haven't.
When you get to issue, Well, tell me what you think of issue 2 when you get to or page 2.
Right. Well, is that it? We're good. We're good, Dave.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Well, thanks, James, for your time. That's been fantastic, really, and thanks for dealing with all the technical issues and with no.
We got there.
Not getting too upset. I mean, when we first started this podcast, Simon said to me, "Oh, I know someone who works on some Transformers comics or something.
Yeah,
and maybe I can get them to come on your podcast." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds great." And then I went to a music festival the other week, Great Escape, Escape, and was like, he goes, "Oh, do you want me to get that guy to come on?" I was like, "Oh yeah. What's his name?" And he went, "Oh, it's Jim Roberts." I was like, "What?" So I was, I was absolutely over the moon that, not that I would happily talk to anybody involved in Transformers, but like as one of my favourite writers, it was fantastic to have him.
Oh, well, that's nice. That's nice to hear. And I've done right by my eldest son as well now. So not that I didn't need my arm twisting, but he's been able to help facilitate this. So
great stuff.
So it's all good.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
lovely to speak to you both.
Yeah, it's been real a pleasure because like Orion said, I've been introduced to this comic book now and the world of these characters.
Well, I hope you
doing this.
I hope you enjoy. I'm slightly trepidatious now, but I hope you do. I don't think we've given too many spoilers away, actually, have we?
Well,
no, it's fine.
I don't know. I sent a YouTube video to Dave saying, "Don't watch this video; it will ruin it for you." But it gives you an overview, and he watched it anyway. So he spoiled himself.
I know what happens. I know all the beats. Right. I want to read it.
Yeah, I'm seriously enjoy reading it.
I've got a friend who hates watching films, but and so just goes to the Wikipedia synopses, to be able to partake in the discourse,
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much. It's been brilliant talking to you.
Yes,
thank you.
Been good fun. Thanks, guys.
Excellent. Well, thanks, and enjoy what's left of your evening.
Thank you.
My optics!
Well, that was rather special, wasn't it? We need to thank James again for humouring us and giving us his time, and our mutual friend and anti-folk celebrity in his own right, Simon, aka Filthy Pedro. Check out his latest project, On Heat, at onheat.band. Really was very, very nice of him to put us in contact with James. Did you enjoy the interview? I bloody well hope so, because it's been a lot of work on our we're doing a hell of a lot of research. Why not let us know how terrible we are as interviewers on social media? Search for us on all of them. You should be able to find us pretty easy. You can find me in particular on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Ghia Orion and Orion_Ghia respectively. And Dave, where can they find you?
You can always find me on Instagram, VirtualDave26.
Excellent. In addition, if you'd like to put your hand in your pocket and chuck a few coins our way in support of the podcast, head over to www.patreon.com/AARGHMyOptics. Do not forget the double A, where you can not only support the podcast, you get special bonus content, and maybe you'll get to ask questions to famous people like James Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget that if you enjoyed the podcast, you can let us know by liking, subscribing, sharing, reviewing, etc., etc. We really appreciate it. And thanks for listening. Please join us next time on
AARGH
AARGH
My
My
Optics!
Optics!